Hi, this is Mr. Fix, and this is your weekly science update for the week of Friday, August 23rd. All right, so this week we had the homeschool connection number 1. I collected that on Thursday, and so this is what it looks like. So students had to look at the situation where 2 thermometers were placed. One was on the countertop, one was in a mitten on the countertop. So students had to select if they think A, B, or C will happen. That's their current thinking. And then they had to describe their thinking and explain why they chose the answer. So they had to explain why they thought that way. What did they experience in real life that led them to think that way? Maybe it was wearing a jacket or wearing some socks versus not wearing a jacket, not wearing a socks. And then at home, they had to write down who they worked with. They had to ask that same question, and that person had to share their thinking with the student. The student had to write in their own words at least 2 sentences to explain why that person thought that way. They then had to do a required challenge where they had to pick 2 items that were in the same location but felt very different in terms of how hot they were. So they couldn't have one thing on the countertop and one thing in the freezer. They had to have both things on the countertop or both things in the freezer. So one example is like in a hot car, the metal part of the seatbelt feels much, much warmer than the seat that they actually sit in. So that's kind of an example. So I graded on how well they followed the directions. They had to write 2 sentences minimum for each time they did that, and they had to complete every section. So this is out of 10 points. If they didn't turn in, they could still turn in for up to full credit. If they didn't get a score they liked, they can also redo it for a higher score. So that was the homework this week. We then did a room scavenger hunt to find things that are located in the room throughout the year. We added that to our reference notebook, and I'm going to show you that at the end of this video, what our reference notebook looked like. Then we went over science safety agreement, page 2 and 3. And let me show you the notebook I keep here, page by page. It's numbered, so if they were absent, they can always look this up. And again, I'll show you what it looks like in real life. We then put norms of collaboration. This is how groups act in groups to facilitate being successful in a group. And sentence starters are tools in which they can practice some of those norms. And we did an activity called Obscertainer, and I'll show you that in a little bit, where they had given an object and they had to make observations, and they recorded observations in their Doing Science notebook. What their initial observations were what they noticed at the very beginning. So maybe it's the color, maybe it's the shape, maybe it's the texture. Then they had to make a prediction of what it looks like inside, or basically the question came to mind, what do they wonder about? Well, what does it look like inside? So then they had to write a prediction or draw a prediction of what they thought it looked like inside. Then they made some more observations and made a second prediction, and then they looked at the results and see if the results matched their prediction. Now in science it doesn't matter if the results match the prediction. It just matters if you got results that make sense, that they're conclusive results instead of inconclusive. All right, then we started the Save the Penguins project, starting with the soda can. So Penguins project, they have to design a shelter that can protect a penguin in hot temperatures. So first we're doing some material testing with the soda can activity. So the soda can activity, which is they're doing in their Doing Science notebook, and the phenomenon is they notice that they take a can of cold soda, put it in their lunch, and then throughout the day it becomes warm. So the problem is how to keep heat energy from the can's surroundings from going inside the can. How do you do that? So we're going to do some materials testing. We wrote down some key transfer terms in page 8 to start thinking about it. Then they wrote a prediction on what they think is going to happen when we test the materials. So there's 6 different materials. Actually, there's 5 different materials. There's one surrounded felt, one in bubble wrap, one in construction paper, one in plastic, one in aluminum foil, and one has nothing. So this is a picture of what those cans look like. And we're going to record the data. We're going to do this on Monday, record the data. So they wrote in their data table onto their Doing Science notebook. So we're ready for this on Monday. So here's a video of the real thing, the real notebook in action. So this is our reference notebook. And we have the table of contents and what page numbers each item goes in. Alright, so this is page 1 with the where in the room is it. We put that in. so where various things in the room. This is their science safety agreement, so we went over the rules on how to act properly in the science classroom so that we minimize the accidents and possible injuries. Then on this page, page 4, the norms collaboration, this is how we're going to collaborate in groups so that groups will have a better chance of succeeding. So there's 7 norms we're going to practice, and we're going to keep track of how well we do on those norms through the progress chart. So already we put in for 821 where we're at on those norms. Then I gave them some tools on how to use science starters for talking and writing. So when the groups, these are examples of how they could provide data, how they could put ideas on the table, how to pose questions in the group. And then in the Doing Science notebook, we did an activity called Obscertainer where we started a science activity, and this is something that they looked at. They wrote initial observations and they noticed things like the color and the shape. And they could hear sounds when it's moved, and so it made us wonder, well, what does it look like inside? And then they made their initial predictions based on their initial observations, and then they made their final prediction and looked at the results. So I had a corresponding matching Obscertainer, so I opened it up for them and they saw inside to see what it looked like. That's what we did this week. Bye bye.